Today we are going to be talking about vaping and how devastating it is for our young adults, and even some adults are vaping. Now, one thing that we need to understand is that vaping is just a progression from cigarette smoking. My name is Dr. Felix Efa. I'm a neuropharmacologist and a toxicologist. Now, if you're new to my page, please subscribe to the channel. This is a page where I discuss everything health, and if you're not new to the channel, then welcome back. Let's have a nice conversation or a nice education about vaping. Now, vaping is a progression from cigarette smoking. Since time immemorial, human beings have had addictions to certain drugs. Now, a lot of people do not know that vaping actually is an addiction. We will actually look into how it started and why is it that a lot of young folks are vaping and the parents don't even know why they are vaping. Now, the reason why I thought about doing this live in the first place is because I have a doctor friend who is an emergency doctor. Now, I had a conversation with him and I asked him, what is one of the reasons why young adults come to the ER, which is emergency room? And he told me something that was very shocking. He said, Dr. Felix, and I said, yes, sir. And he said, one of the main reasons why people come to the hospital, young adults come to the ER, is because of vaping associated lung injury. And I was shocked by what he told me. And I said, what do you mean? Now, I'm someone who has multiple papers. I've done research on vaping. I have also played a major role in the British government decision in banning certain types of devices in vaping devices in England. Now you can not buy the disposable ones anymore. You can buy the reusable ones in England, but not the disposable ones, which I'm very proud of. But looking at the translatability of my research and how impactful it is for the young adults, I was very shocked. Now, how do we even get here in the first place? Let me take you back a little bit. Since the discoveries of the Americas by Christopher Columbus, cigarette smoking has become a popular pastime. Now, the reason why cigarette smoking became a popular pastime is because of the nicotine that is in the cigarette. Because nicotine has so many effects on the human body, right? It gets you high. It raises your alertness because it raises your blood, raises your blood pressure. It also raises your heart rate. And by so doing, it keeps you alert. Now, a lot of people actually smoke, but we do know that smoking is one of the leading cause of preventable deaths. Now, when I talk about preventable deaths, I mean deaths that could be prevented. Now, smoking is associated with lung cancers. It's been associated with different types of lung cancers, like non-small lung cancers and small lung cancers. It's been associated with heart attacks. It's been associated with strokes. It's been associated with obesity, and the list continues. Now, all type of cancers have been associated with smoking, right? Now, because smoking contains more than 8,000 chemicals, so when you take a cigarette and you lit it up, it contains so many chemicals, about 8,000 of these chemicals. Now, among the 8,000 chemicals, we know that about 69 of the chemicals that are contained in cigarette smoke do cause cancer. So we call them carcinogenic compounds. So when you inhale cigarette smoke, it is very toxic. Now, apart from the fact that if you're directly inhaling it, you definitely will lead to like medical conditions, but even secondhand smoking has also been associated with severe medical conditions. Now, today we're not even going to talk about smoking or the risk associated with smoking. We're just talking about e-cigarettes. But then I wanted to give you a little bit of a background as to how we even got to the e-cigarette development in the first place. So some of the risk associated with cigarette smoking here you can see is you have neurological disorders. So people that smoke are more likely to have dementia, are more likely to have Parkinson's, are more likely to have so many medical conditions, anxiety, depression. They're also more likely to have the gut microbiome dysbiosis. So a lot of changes are gonna happen in the gut microbiome, which of course would then lead to inflammation. You have oral and dental health. When people smoke, they tend to have sort of like, bad breath. Their gums become decay. They have gingivitis. Their oral microbiome actually changes its composition. You also have cardiovascular diseases like angina, obviously probably leading to heart attacks if people don't quit smoking. Of course, cancers, because smoking contains certain chemicals that can penetrate the nuclei of the cell and directly cause what we call breakage and damage to the DNA of the cell, which then will lead to several cancers. Now, like I said earlier on, smoking has been associated with all type of cancers. So apart from that, diabetes, right, and strokes, smoking has been associated with that. COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. The primary cause of COPD is smoking. When you inhale so many toxicants in your lungs, they can lead to chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, which is COPD. It basically impacts your physical activity. So inactivity. So if you smoke for a long period of time, your lungs capacity decreases, which means that you are not going to be able to do exercises and stuff like that. Obesity, of course, because when you smoke, your metabolism is impaired, and even the way your body stores glucose is going to be very, very impaired. Now, you also have low immune system, because your immune system is battled over a long period of time. You're going to have chronic inflammation, and when you have chronic inflammation, it will lead to immunomodulatory effect, which also means that you're going to have low immunity. Now, let's look at some of the things that can actually occur when you smoke. Now, you look at the healthy lung, right, which is nice and pink. But when you smoke for a long period of time, you're going to have tumors growing in your lungs, because you're going to have like a lot of inflammation in your lungs. And over a long period of time, it damages your DNA. Your DNA will basically lead to more damaged proteins. Now, the more damaged proteins you have, the more you increase your chances of cancers, or COPD or asthma. Now, of course, the particles are gonna impact your eosinophils, your macrophages, and your neutrophils. These are all immune cells that are found in the lungs that play a huge role in the clearance and the health of the lungs. Now, over a long period of time, when you overly stimulate the immune cells, what is going to happen is you're going to release certain inflammatory markers like your interleukins, and then these interleukins over a long period of time are going to start damaging your lungs. And that is why smoking is such a terrible thing to do. And once you're addicted to smoking, it is very dangerous. Now, a lot of people do not know that smoking is vaping and e-cigarette is similar to smoking. In fact, it is a progression, is the modern day smoking. Now, how do we even get to the vaping? A lot of people don't know, and this includes parents. So many parents don't know that their children, their young adults, are vaping, and they are actually using nicotine and addicted to nicotine, because the device does not look like cigarettes anymore. Back in the day, we used to have devices that looked like cigarettes, like back in maybe 2008, 2009, the devices looked like cigarette, but at the same time, they do not even smell like cigarette. They don't burn like cigarette. Now we've progressed over the period to different generations of e-cigarettes. So that's the reason why a lot of parents don't have a clue. So you may go to the room and your child is holding, maybe they're studying, right, and they're holding something that looks like pen, and they have in their mouth, they have it in their mouth, and you may think, oh, my child is studying and they have the pen in the mouth, but you don't know that they are actually vaping all this while. Then we move to the second generation, and then the third generation, which looks like a box. Some of them even have screens, right? And then, it looks like a device, it looks like a modern device. So you may never be able to know. And then the fourth generation, which is like Juul, these ones are much portable. So you can put in their pocket, and you will never be able to actually smell and know that your child is vaping, which is very, very equivalent to them smoking. It is just the modern way of smoking, because a person who smokes and a person who does e-cigarette or does shisha, they're all addicted to nicotine. But I'll give you a little bit of a background as to how we even got to this place in the first place. Now, one thing that you need to know before this, let's go here. One thing that you need to know is that one thing that you need to know is that the vaping of that kids are doing, you will not be able to tell that they are vaping, because it is not a cigarette. It is not upright cigarette. It is basically cigarette-like device which has an e-liquid. The e-liquid is like a solution that they pour inside it, right? And the solution may have flavors. So if you enter the room of your kid and that place smells like flavors like strawberry, vanilla, it smells good in the room. Everything it smells good, right? You may think like it's a perfume, but essentially it is just an e-liquid which has been poured in the device, and that device has a battery, and that battery is basically burning the liquid, and they are inhaling that liquid, which contains nicotine, it contains glycerin, and it contains propylene glycol. Now, one thing that you guys need to understand is that the flavors that smell so good, sometimes when you're walking behind someone who is vaping, you may think, oh my God, this thing smells so good, right? But these are also some flavors that are found in cakes, right? Now, one beautiful thing about it is if you eat it through the digestive route, is mostly safe. But when you inhale it, when you burn it and you inhale it, it can be very toxic for your lungs. And that is the thing why so many young adults are going to the ER, going to the emergency room, because they have been vaping these sort of like substances, liquids that are damaging their lungs. And that is why my doctor friend told me that one of the frequent reasons why young adults come to the ER is because of vaping. Now, some of the vapes, that's how they look like. Juul, they look very fancy, they look very portable, they look very fashionable, and inside the small pot on the right hand side is what the nicotine, the flavors, the propylene glycol, and the vegetable glycerin are packed, and then they put it on top of the device, and then they when they push it, it basically, the battery powers that these e-liquid, and they inhale it and they get high. It is basically them smoking, but it's a modern way of smoking. Now, look exactly how it looks like when they go to school. So this is exactly how it looks like. The young adults are vaping stuff like these, and you will not be able to tell, because it does not smell like cigarette. It does not smell bad. It in fact smells like, vanilla, strawberry, and all those kind of things. So you may not be able to tell as a parent that your child is vaping. But this is what has been associated with the health effects that have been associated with vaping. Now, when you look at an e-cigarette device, sometimes they look like this, and when you're walking, especially in England, right, or the US and these developed countries, when you're walking down the street, you will see that there are so many of these devices that look like this on the floor. Now, what they contain is volatile organic compounds, and these volatile organic compounds have been shown to actually have an impact on cancers. They can develop cancers. They, like I said, they have flavorings. These flavorings have been shown to actually cause some irritations and some hyper-responsiveness of the immune cells inside the lungs. And so you may hear that your child is coughing aggressively. They are always catching a cold. They are always catching, some lung infection. That is because secretly these kids are vaping. Apart from that, the fume, the vapor that comes out of these vapes, they contain ultra fine particles, and these ultra fine particles can actually get to the lungs, and they can cross the lungs and get into the bloodstream. Now, the more they get into the bloodstream, they can go around the body, impact the brain, impact the heart, impact the kidneys, and of course overall impact the health. Now, they also contain nicotine, and nicotine is one of the most addictive substances in the whole wide world. It's the 5th most addictive substance, and on top of it you have cocaine, you have heroin, and you have some addictive drugs. So nicotine is by far a very, very addictive drug compared to a lot of these drugs that are on the market. Now, one thing is, once your kid is addicted to nicotine, they are doomed for life, because guess what? They would have to be addicted for the rest of their lives. And that is why it is extremely important that as parents, you actually try your best to monitor the activities of your kid, because nicotine, once you're hooked on it, you're going to be hooked on it for life. And apart from the fact that it has very severe consequences on the health of the kid, it also has very severe consequences on the pocket of the kid, because they would have to sort of like be on the nicotine for forever. One of these vaping devices can cost up to $20 and sometimes even £15 in the UK. Now imagine, some kids actually can go through one of these about one every 3 days or so. So it is extremely expensive. Now, like I said earlier on, apart from the fact that it contains nicotine, it also contains cancer-causing chemicals like formaldehyde, like acrolein, like toluene. These are all volatile organic compounds and cancer-causing agents. So some people may not know that their kids are smoking, and then you go to the hospital and it's like, oh, your kid has developed lung cancer. And you're like, how did this happen? Well, for all this while, they have been vaping. And one of the things that you need to understand is the fact that they also contain heavy metals, such as nickel, tin, and lead. So as parents, you need to be very, very careful with the things that your kid is doing in their room. Now, if you feel like they're holding any device and you feel like they smell different, I think it's time that you actually question them. And sometimes these kids, because of peer pressure, they be vaping some of these stuff. So it is very important that as a parent, you pay attention to this. Now, the reason why is because they actually cause a lot of issues to the lungs. Now, if you were to screen the lungs of a vaping kid, you will see that it is filled with a lot of fluid. Over a long period of time of vaping, the lung is going to develop so many issues. Then you go to the hospital and then it's like, oh, your kid has developed some lung cancer or something like that. So it is extremely important that as parents, you pay attention to these kind of activities that your kids are doing. Now, when the study was done in England, right, about vaping, we realized that a lot of the kids that are vaping, they progress from vaping to using cigarette. This is because after some time of using the vaping, they realize that they need something stronger that will give them the nicotine surge that they need, and so they can transition to using cigarettes. However, this requires more research. Also, the reason why e-cigarette was invented was never for the kids to get access to it. However, because of the flavor that the e-cigarette contains, the kids love it. And so the question is, why are we having some of these devices on the market for kids to have access to them? But then the argument is, the e-cigarette was never meant for the kids. It was meant for people that were cigarette smokers who basically didn't want to have all the cancer-causing agents in them, because the truth of the matter is that the e-cigarette, even though it is toxic in some ways, does not contain a lot of the cancer-causing agents like cigarette would contain, because most of the cancer-causing agents are smaller in quantity compared to in e-cigarettes compared to cigarettes. And so the argument is, should we ban the e-cigarette altogether because our kids are having access to them, so that then we leave the cigarette smokers to not sort of like convert to something less toxic? Or should we keep them so that then the kids will have access to them? Now, one thing that we need to understand is, if we were to sort of like strengthen the policy so that kids will not have access to these e-cigarettes, that would be great. But that's not the case. The truth is, even if we ban these e-cigarettes, these kids are smarter than their parents. So they will still have access to illegal e-cigarette devices that then would lead to even more severe consequences than the ones that are regulated. Now, in England, some of these devices have been banned, yet these kids are still having access to the e-cigarette devices. So where are they buying them? They are buying them from illegal sources. They are buying them from online. They are buying them from like the shop, the corner shops, which is very dangerous, because some of these devices and the e-liquids, the nicotine that contain in them, are very high, and because they are not regulated and because they have been banned, these kids are going to have so many damages to their lungs. And that is why policy making is very, very difficult, because if you ban them, they're still going to have access to them. If you don't ban them, they're having access to them and they're vaping, and they're actually causing so much damage to them. Now, very recently, we noticed that apart from the fact that it may cause some health damages, it can permanently damage your lungs. So many young folks, young adults, are going to the A&E and they are ending up with chronic diseases of the lungs and permanent damage of the lungs, which cannot be reversed. And so with this information, I urge the parents to be very, very vigilant, because your kids are starting to vape. Your kids are starting to do certain drugs that are going to be very detrimental to the kids' health. Now, when you are a kid before the age of 25 and you start doing some of these drugs like nicotine and vaping, it is going to impact your prefrontal cortex. Now, what is a prefrontal cortex? Is the part of the brain that is mediating decision making, cognition, and stuff like that. It's extremely important. And most of the time, when these kids start vaping at the age of 10, 11, 12, 13 and upwards, then the nicotine interferes with the development of the brain. And so you may think that your kid is not smart, but it's because they are vaping, and the vaping is interfering with the development of the brain. So it is extremely important that we pay attention to these kids. Sometimes, establishing like a cool relationship with these kids is very, very important. Sometimes to, knowing their friends is extremely important. Knowing who they hang out with. If you see any unusual activities with their friends, it is very important that you actually try your best to stop them from connecting with some of these people. And I know that a lot of parents don't even know who their kids' friends are. And that is why these kids are developing some of these habits. So it is extremely important that we pay attention to them. Now, we have so many kids coming to the A&E with a lot of inflammation within their gut, right? Which impairs their cognition too, because like I always say, when your gut is not healthy, your brain cannot be healthy, because there is a connection with the brain called the gut-brain axis. And so with this presentation, is a very quick one. I really just wanted to sort of like tell the parents that so many of these kids are vaping. Now, apart from the fact that they are vaping, a lot of them are also doing shisha, or we call it hookah, right? Now, these hookahs are damaging the health of these kids because they are getting addicted. Now, when these kids get addicted to some of these drugs, they lose focus at school. They lose focus altogether, and then their performance actually plummet. Now, one of the misunderstanding, one of the one of the lies that these kids are being told is that, oh, it's just flavor, it's just fun, it's just like toffee. And so they are vaping them without knowing that it is essentially collapsing their lungs. Because I've seen so many kids collapsing their lungs with some of these e-cigarette devices, some of the hookah devices. And so I urge you guys to be extremely vigilant to your kids. This is the end of today's broadcast, and tomorrow I will see you, and we're going to talk about